In this video, I'll show you how to assemble the cable pulley, base assembly. So we're going to start a new, now make sure you're under metric templates, and we're going to do an assembly, and it's going to be a standard millimeter IAM, millimeter Inventor assembly model. Say create. Now remember, when you start, always pick a part that would be the most stable, like the base of the part, which in this case we do have something called the base. So let's insert that into the page. Click, right click, say OK. Let's get it oriented here. Actually, I have that. Let me turn off that. Now your planes, let me go back to my base model. See, I left that work plane on. So usually what I do is try to make sure I have all my parts open that I'm going to use in this assembly. So I'm just going to come in here and turn that off for now. Let's go back to our assembly. Okay, the next part I'll add will be the pulley. And check your orientation. Make sure it's reasonably close to the way you want. And this is actually just right. So I'm going to click, right click, say OK. So I want to constrain that pulley. Now the obvious choice here is use concentricity between the center lines of those two parts. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. Again, make sure you see the center line of that, center line of that, and we'll say OK. You can see the pulley is constrained on that center line. Now the next thing would be put it in this space here. Now the smartest way to do this is to use midplane. So you want the midplane of the base and the midplane of the pulley. It's super convenient. You will have to activate those midplanes. So let's go back to our base and let's open up our origin here and see if, because of the way I built this sketch, if I right click, I already have a midplane there. So I'm just going to use that. If you don't, then just go up to plane, midplane between two planes, and then click on two surfaces that would get you a midplane. So in that case, if I go to that outer surface there and outer surface there, it'll create a midplane for me. So midplanes are easy to generate. I already have one because of the way I built the part. And as you get more familiar with creating parts and thinking ahead about assemblies, you'll start to do that as well. Let's go to the pulley and do the same thing. We want a midplane there. And the way I built this part around the origin, if I open up this and look and see, I do have, just have to turn that, I have a midplane there as well, which works. And while I'm at it, let's just do the shaft. So I want a midplane on the shaft. Now, if you don't have one, if you didn't extrude in both directions, again, just go plane, midplane between two planes, and click on the two ends, and that'll give you a midplane. All right, let's go back to our assembly. So now all we have to do is, in terms of constraining, is click from that plane to that plane. You have to check the alternate solution in this case and say OK. So now what I have, you can see the pulley will still rotate, which is what I want, but it can't move in any other direction. I only need one, and you can also open up these and see the planes and see your mates that you have. I only need one of those planes to be active. Let me go back to the pulley and just right click, turn off the visibility. Back to my assembly, and let's insert the shaft into the assembly. Now again, we want to pay attention to the orientation. If you see the green arrow, that's the Y. We want to rotate around the Y. So I'm going to right click, rotate Y. That's a good orientation. So click, right click, say OK. And again, to constrain, I will use center line to center line. And then like I did before, I'll use that midplane to midplane, alternate solution, say OK. And you see, because the ends of this stick out, I really couldn't constrain the ends of the shaft to the end of that housing. So typically, if you got lucky and the shaft is the same length as that spacer, then that would work. And in this case, that would not work for you at all. Let's go back to my parts. I'm going to turn off those planes. I think the other one was on the base. Yep. So again, that's why I always have the parts open that I'm working on. And there is my assembly.